My name is Andy Cahan, Director of Author Events, and I am pleased to introduce our guests this evening. There are so many accolades to choose from to recommend Yiyun Li's new book of reflections, Dear Friend, From My Life I Write to You in Your Life, that to select only one seems a disservice. But here's the one that I think that bears the most weight. Yiyun Li has written a remarkable account of her literary life, begun in her youth in China, with the books that first engaged her in the great conversations of literature. In her own emergence as an important and gifted writer in English, she has brought a new voice to the great world. She has also been, in the deepest sense, sustained by it. Her new book is a meditation on the fact that literature itself lives and gives life. That high praise comes from Marilynne Robinson. Miss Li is the author of the novel The Vagrants and the story collection Gold Boy, Emerald Girl. Her debut fiction collection, 1,000 Years of Good Prayers, won the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, the PEN Hemingway Award, and the Guardian First Book Award. She was a 2010 MacArthur Fellow, one of Granta's 21 best young American novelists under 35, and one of the New Yorker's top 20 writers under 40. Tonight, Ms. Li will be interviewed by fellow writer Carmen Machado, whose stories you may know from reading The New Yorker, Granta, and the Paris Review, among other publications. She is also the author of the forthcoming story collection, Her Body and Other Parties. Please welcome Yiyun Li and Carmen Machado.
I'm so excited to be talking today about this amazing new book, which has just totally devoured my days recently. I was so in love with it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming.
Yes. So in this book, you talk about the rejection of the Chinese language and retreating into English as a safe space where, among other things, your mother could not follow you. And in fact, you will not let your books be translated into Chinese. Since this is your first book of nonfiction, I was wondering if you found the essay to be a similarly safe or unsafe place, and how that's different than your fiction.
You know, you can always hide a little better in fiction than in nonfiction. You can always say, those characters are not me. For years and years, when people ask me if I am an autobiographical writer, I would say, no, absolutely not. You know, look at these people, they're not me. And one year when I was in Beijing, of course this happened at home, right? So someone said, are you an autobiographical writer? And I said, no, I'm not. Of course not. And she said, but I counted, your stories. Two of your father characters were nuclear physicists, and your own father was a nuclear physicist. And I said, oh, really? That's laziness on my part. I'm sorry, that doesn't mean I'm an autobiographical writer. But I think writing nonfiction, clearly I'm coming out of the closet. And now I say, when I say I'm not a autobiographical writer, that's a lie. And of course, any writer is autobiographical to some extent. Even I think things you say and things you don't say are equally important. So what you don't put into your writing, that's the part that I am autobiographical, I think. So, but it was nonfiction, I think you cannot always hide. There's a point that you should stop hiding. And for me, that is, you may know the book was written during 2 years of deep depression, and I was hospitalized. And a little bit was, I couldn't figure out how to write fiction anymore. And I couldn't even figure out how to read fiction. So the only thing I could read was nonfiction, a lot of diaries and journals and correspondence of writers. And sustained by that reading, I started to write a little bit of these essays as a way to figure out how to get myself out of that state. And so, do I feel a little bit more exposed? I would say I feel more honest these days. And it doesn't feel that I am exposing myself, but I do feel that honesty, like to me, I think it's like the more honest I am, or the more honest one is, the more protective one feels. So I think that honesty really helps.
Sort of along those same lines, when I was reading your book and reading about this sort of element of language, I was thinking about something that I've read about called the sapirwhorf hypothesis, which is this idea in linguistics that we are shaped, that our thoughts are not just a way for us to express, or language is not a way for us to express our thoughts only, but also shapes our thoughts. And this actually, I know the movie Arrival, which is based on a short story by Ted Chiang, which is out recently, was sort of talking about this issue. And I was wondering if you felt like that sort of movement into English and that process of, as you say in the book, banishing Chinese and dreaming in English and talking to yourself in English, if you feel like that has shaped sort of your cognitive landscape.
Right. Yes, I think in a way okay. So I was thinking about the same question for a while, because there are a couple things. I have lived in America for 20 years, and more I already moved in writing from Chinese to English. I never written in Chinese, but even just in daily life, I talk to myself in English and I dream in English. And am I making myself new in a new language? You can say yes, but you can also say no, because part of, if I did make myself completely new in English language, then I think part of my past would not have troubled me so much. But clearly they followed me across the border, across the language into English. And that was a new discovery while writing this book. And so, but back to the can you form a good thought with a language you cannot use well? I remember when I was in high school, I was always a good writing student, and I was really good at writing propaganda. And when I was in the army too, I had this lovely, my squad leader, we were all innocent girls, but she did not like me, I hated her, so. So she always gave me the assignment. She said, either you write a propaganda piece for me, or you clean the pigsty or the toilet. And I always chose to write, because I knew I could write well. But I hated that experience, because I was using the language in a way that was so public. It was used by hundreds and thousands, millions of people, and I had no joy using that language. So moving into English, at least I think I sort of got rid of that part of myself, and I knew, and I still know, that I use English the way I want to use it.
You also talk about the challenge of using the word I,
Yes.
which is not, you said is not used in Chinese, but it obviously is in English, and you find it very melodramatic. So is that part of it as well, that sort of, that transition? It's like learning to embrace the I.
Yes. When I first started learning English, I still remember when I this was years ago, when I was little, when I was 12 or 13, and we were learning English letters. I could not tell the difference between capital I and lowercase l. I still remember I had trouble with that. And then one day I went into a foreign language bookstore and opened an English book. Oh my goodness, all these I's. All these standing alone I, and that's when I learned the I, how to recognize the I. But I did not like the word I. I think partly, as you said, in Chinese, sometimes we don't say I. Linguistically, you can skip that I. Or sometimes we say we. Even if I, went to the park, I would say we went to the park. In a way to avoid claiming that individuality, avoid responsibility. So you are protected by this mass of we who are those we, and you can never tell. But moving into English, linguistically, I think grammatically, I could not say we. So, but I hate to say I. I don't know. It's just it's a word that if you did not grow up with, you would not feel comfortable speaking. So English language is helpful. It provides that really neutral word, one. One cannot say this. And I always use one, and someone said, well, you sound so archaic, so old. Only old people use that. So, yeah, but I'm trying. I think just even writing this book, I noticed, I spent 2 years writing the book. At first, you would see one all over the pages. And in revision, slowly, I could notice a couple eyes coming in here, a few eyes coming in there. And I think, in a way, I was also trying to overcome this fear of using I.
One thing I loved about this book is how you engage with the idea of the conversation or lack of conversation happening between authors and readers. And you talk about when you're a young woman, you read this particular poetess and you felt this deep pain that you could not be her contemporary, that she had died, I think before you were born. And because of time and geography, this loss is sort of ever present, right? Like when you read a book, even if the person lives in your city and is alive at the same time you are, there's still this like distance that happens. And you often can read authors who have died a long time ago. And you say a writer and a reader should never be allowed to meet. They live in different time frames. When a book takes on life for a reader, it is already dead for the writer. So I wanted to talk about that sort of gap between the reader and the writer, and if you think that sort of enhances or diminishes that conversation and that sort of space.
Yes, I think there are so many ways to look at it. I think when I was writing that sentence, it was because I went to teach in Iowa for 2 weeks. When you go teach in a writer's workshop, the students, I'm sure you have the experience, the students always say, the readers would think this, the readers would think that, as though the readers would not like what you did in your story. So I was teaching there 1 year, and there was this student who actually was from Africa. So clearly she did not have our, classic workshop training. And everybody was saying, readers this, reader that. She said, well, can anyone help me and just explain to me who is this reader? We haven't met him, and we already hate him. And I just thought, she's the smartest woman, that's right. I said, and then she asked me, and I thought for a while, I thought, actually, we don't meet the readers. I think our books meet the readers. And I think the book is sort of the boundary between a writer and a reader. And if you sort of as a writer, if you bypass the book, you reach your reader, it's almost like propaganda to me. I think it's like overreaching. Because you're dictating your readers how to read, and you're forcing your ideas in how to read a book to the readers. And on the other hand, I think sometimes readers also want to reach, bypass that boundary or cross that boundary, and they want the writer rather than the book, and that could be dangerous too. So I believe, I think that book is the thing in between.
It's like the umbilical cord.
Yes. And if you look at it, I mean, for me, I think I read a lot of dead authors. Their books are here. Their books are always going to be here, and I'm not going to go to the grave to get them out of the grave to talk to me. Yeah. So, but I get so much out of their words, and I think that's the most important thing.
You also say, and this is another, I underlined this book a lot, you also say a reader always wins in the end. A reader has infinite time to interfere with the characters' lives. So it's like in this is struggle back and forth, but the writer will die, and the reader, this like disembodied reader, will live forever and be fussing with it always.
Right. I think that came from, maybe it was like a conversation with Turgenev, who I loved Turgenev, and when he published, I think it's The Virgin Soil, and everybody attacked him. And so he quoted a friend, and he said, He said every writer has to follow his own literary coffin several times before he dies. So, which means every time you publish a book, you're following this book as though the book is a coffin. And so I think, yes, once you finish the book, you really have said all you can say and all you have to say. But the readers have more to say, and they have all the space and time to say what they want to say. So I do think the readers, in the end, always win, and that's a good thing. I mean, because oftentimes I'm also in the position of a reader. So I mean, I just said I read a lot of journals and diaries of writers. For instance, two of the writers I wrote about, one writer I wrote a lot in this book is Carmen Machado, who was a difficult woman, difficult writer. And she had an interesting and fraught relationship with Virginia Woolf. They were good friends, but they were also, if you read Virginia Woolf's diaries, it's almost like, if you put it today, it's like, I sent her an email, why is she not replying my email? That kind of anxiety. But Virginia Woolf always says, why is she not replying my letter? Why does she not come to see me? But if over some 10, 20, 15 years of their friendship, and then you read Catherine Mansfield's journals, Virginia Woolf only appeared twice. Each time in a single sentence. So that's what I meant. The readers always win. They would not know how much they appeared in each other's private paper. But we, the readers, once you see it, you understand that relationship so well. Of course, I felt so much pain for Woolf when I read that. And on the other hand, I think, that's a reader's advantage. We always see a little bit more than the writers themselves.
Before you were a professional writer, you were an immunologist, a scientist. And you sort of discuss, I've read in a few interviews that you sort of apply these principles of dissection sort of to your thoughts, and that becomes that's partially sort of the project of this book. What other sort of elements of your scientific training do you feel appear in your writing and just in your reading and in your art?
Yes, I like my scientific training. I came to become an immunologist. Part of the reason I really like immune system. Our bodies really have a good system of protecting ourselves, and the immune system is that thing that immune system can recognize anything foreign, and if you have anything foreign, the immune system would attack that. And the immune system has memories. Just to think, your your digestive system may not have good memory, but your immune system has a good memory, sometimes lifelong memory. But that memory could also go wrong. So immune system could mistake self as others. So your immune system start to attack self, and then we get autoimmune disease. So I like that working concept. And when I was working on the book, I had a couple years of difficult time. And even when I was in the middle of it, I realized what happened was whatever I felt, whatever I thought, my own mind was targeting at itself. So I would call it an autoimmune condition of my own mind. And that was almost a unresolved problem. I'm attacking myself. So I thought the only thing I could do while I was in the middle of it was I could make use of this condition. Why don't I just attack myself a little more by writing? So that's the dissection part where the dissecting came in. I just dissect my thoughts, and as though you were dissecting, some sort of tissue or some system under the glasses. And so I like that. I think science requires a lot of precision. And I like precision more than anything. I'm not a very good scientist. I think partly is I'm a purposeless scientist. I was a purposeless scientist. I didn't really care about the end result. I think that's my problem. But I like the middle part. I just like doing science. I like that part.
You have this amazing line in the book where you say, "My refusal to be defined by the will of others is my one and only political statement." And I was thinking a lot about politics for no particular reason at all. But I was thinking about sort of how we've transitioned from this, this presidency and this administration where literature was actually a very active part of the conversation to a presidency where, the bookshelves have just like, business, ghostwritten business books on the shelf. And this sort of idea of the choice to be a reader being a political decision. And so just thinking about the choice to be a reader and also a writer and how the decision to commit something to the page, how that is political. And I was wondering if you felt if just the choices that you make as a reader and as a writer are similarly political.
I think my thoughts about being a political writer have evolved a little, partly because of this administration, I think. And I would go back to that quote you said, my one and only political statement is I don't want to be defined by other people's wills, which referred to, over the past 10 years of my writing career, I would get both sides. For instance, I was in my local bookstore. It was my neighborhood bookstore, and I was doing a reading, and a woman came and she said, "Your father was a nuclear physicist. My father was a nuclear physicist too." It turned out they were actually colleagues, and we actually grew up in the same compound. She said, "I know what you wrote in this novel was true, but I don't like it. I don't like that you make China ugly. And because I want to be proud as a Chinese, and you make me feel bad." And I said, I understand how you feel, but I cannot write what you want me to write because that's propaganda. And so that's kind of the political writing she wanted me to do, was you have to go away from being political or being critical of China. And I got a lot of that kind of things. But on the other hand, I was in Asia Society in San Francisco, and this was for my collection of stories, and my characters really, they were so rebellious to the point they did not want to engage with politics. That was their way to rebel against the regime, as they did not engage with the system. So a young man who actually, he lived in China for a few years, and he's American, and he was upset with me. He said, you're not brave enough to write about politics. He said, "Why are you not being a political writer?" And I thought, you cannot ask me to do that either. That's propaganda too. That's what you want me to do. So when I wrote that sentence, I was thinking about these comments, and I thought, anytime you had an agenda when you start writing, you are becoming sort of a mouthpiece for something else. But I like what you said, we can't avoid being political. I think we're always political, and we always live in a political society. I think I, as a person, am political. So I noticed, because I have 2 children, one of them never speaks at school, and he's a quiet person. And so with the traveling ban, and the middle school did a study of immigrant history. So he came home. I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, we talked about immigrant history." I said, I want you to do one thing. I said, you should stand up and say, "My parents are immigrants." And when I said that, I thought, well, I knew I have always known I'm an immigrant, and they have always known too. They are immigrants' children. But I've never really made this request and say, you need to go out and say I'm an immigrant's children. I'm an immigrant's son. So, yeah, I don't think one can avoid being political. But as a writer, I want to remove myself a little bit. I think my characters are political. engage with, sometimes they engage, sometimes they disengage as a political choice. Yeah.
I have read and heard that you're working on some new projects now.
Yes.
A novel and a short story collection, is that right?
Yeah, this short story collection is just something that it's just going on, and I think I have 2/3 of collection done, so that eventually is going to finish, I think, at some point. Yeah, I'm working on a novel, yes, and I'm very excited about the novel because it is about America. Finally, it's a story about America, and I have lived here for 21 years now, and more I feel American, maybe even more than I feel Chinese. So I feel certain this is going to be a novel about America.
Do you feel like this book was something you had to kind of get out of your system before you moved on to other fiction, or because since you've only written fiction before, so
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes, a friend of mine was talking to me the other day. She said, "What if I'm writing the same book all my life?" And I said, well, there are certain writers who write. I think, a lot of people actually write the same book again and again. But I do think as writers, we worry about writing the same book over and over. We want to have a little bit more development or growth. And for me, I think it's, part of going into writing about America is my change or my growth. But also just going out of my repertoire. I know the characters I write well are the characters who are stoic, who are, quiet, and sometimes, resilient in a way that is annoying to people because they put up with all these things. So I know those characters, but I think they're more than that, and I think as a writer I should go out to embrace or to see other characters. So I think this book, the process of writing it is really to open up my mind a little and say, there's more than one way to write. There are more than, these characters. So I'm working on a novel. Sometimes I actually think, oh, this novel is going to be a hilarious novel. I'm making myself laugh, which is the first time in history. Although I may have a low threshold for laughter, I think. I read, this is a side point, but just speaking of reading writers' journals and letters, I read Rebecca West. When she was young, she went to visit Thomas Hardy. And by then, Thomas Hardy was this old, grumpy man, and he just published a collection of poems, and everybody called his poems pessimistic. And he was very upset, so he complained. He said, "I don't see these poems pessimistic." And his wife said, "My dear, they are not what you think as hilarious." So he did think himself as hilarious. Nobody else thought so. So I worry that maybe I am like Hardy. Like, I think of myself as funny, but other people think of my writing bleak. So that's dangerous.
Yeah, right. So we have time for one more question before we go out to the audience for a Q&A. And I almost hesitate to ask this question because it feels a little bit self-helpy, and your book is the antithesis of that. But I just wanted to know if you had any advice for artists who struggle with mental illness, sort of as part of their just, when they're working on their projects that you've sort of learned.
Yeah, I think one is, I think there are a few things I learned over this period of time. One is mental illness does not define you. Like, it's not like if you have a cancer, you are not cancer, right? So if you have some mental illness, you cannot say I'm mentally ill. I mean, I'm not. I just have one condition that I need to manage. So I think the awareness of that one has to manage certain conditions, that is helpful. Two is, I think sometimes we think if you have mental illness, it's because you're either weak or you're selfish or you're all these things people would put negative words on it. It's not. It is really just like any condition that we have to live with. And also, I don't think it's helpful to think you must cure yourself. You must, overcome something. I think it's just, partly I think, I wrote it in a book. Part of a mental illness came from family history. I have a family history of mental illness. It's just like my hair color and my eye color. I just accept it and live with it. It's a little harder than a hair color. A little more harder, like much harder actually. But you can't just say, I don't want my hair to be black. I want to dye my hair. But I think it's good to live with something and to take it, as something you have to deal with. And I think artists, yes, of course, it is hard when you are in the middle of the project. I think part of the breaking down had something to do with not wanting to take medication. Because, as artists, we always worry taking medications would, interfere with our minds, would make us work less efficient. I think, part of David Foster Wallace, it is, he worried that medication made him unable to work. And I had this worry too. And so I actually had a lot of concern about taking medication. And I remember some professional help, they really were helpful, and they said things to me that I thought was helpful. I said to one doctor, I really don't want to take medication because I worry that, some people when they do that, they can't write. She said, you are you, why are you thinking about somebody else? And I thought, well, you're right. I just need to be me and see where I go from here. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
I wanted to thank you for your writing. And I was wondering what advice you could give for people who would like to write a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too
people who, can I ask if you asked a question because you wanted to write a memoir? Yeah. I think a memoir, there are many ways to think about a memoir. A memoir is a narrative, but a memoir is also, I was actually thinking about this yesterday when I could not sleep. Sometimes I can, right? So in Chinese, memoir has a little bit different. Speaking of not using Chinese, I actually went back to Chinese. If you translate memoir back to Chinese, it's memory record. And I like that better than memoir, because when we speak of memoir, because people would say my book is not a conventional memoir, which is not, because we talk about memoir as a book with a narrative arc, but I don't think life is lived with a narrative arc. Life is a messy thing, so I don't look for that arc, but I like that term, memory record. You're actually making a record of memory and making sense of your memories, which is what I did in the book. So if you think about that way, I think you could just start with memories and look for patterns. I think memories tell us a lot about the patterns of our life. And I think patterns are more interesting than arc. So maybe you can just start with recording the memories.
I'm wondering if your parents have read your book and how you have weathered their comments.
Yes. You asked the best question. I write in English. Part of the reason is my mother doesn't read English. And I think I always say that, and the more I I mean, I think I need a space from parents, from my parents. And if you read my book, you realize my parents, you probably, well, any parents, I think we need space from them, right? So for me, I don't want my parents to read my books. And I think over the years, they probably understand that's my preference, because I refuse to have my books translated into Chinese for the reason I don't want them to read. So they haven't read this book or any other book. And I think in a way I want to protect them more than I want to protect myself, because when they brought me up to be a scientist. They brought me up as this really good girl. And now I came to America, I became a different person, and I think they would feel a little lost if they realize that's who I am in writing. So no, I haven't told them I have a book coming out.
I wanted to ask you about a word that you used a couple of times, and it was very interesting to me just all throughout, but the consistency of the word, and that was the word propaganda. And what I sensed was, I mean, there's so many little things that you said about it along the way, but it almost feels like so much of what you're about is kind of a rebellion against what propaganda fundamentally is, which is an imposition of another point, of a forced point of view on, you know, a story, your way of looking at the world. And I remember you used a phrase at one point about how if you're a writer and you're looking to have joy in language, then it's the opposite of that. You can't find joy in writing if it's to the purpose of propaganda. The word seemed to be a very strong word for you, and as I said, it came up several times. Could you just elaborate on it a little bit, on your experience with it, on what you feel about it, or on where you see it, where it evidences itself, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do react strongly to propaganda. When I say I love English language, I also love Chinese language, but not Chinese language in propaganda. When I was little, I read all these old poems, Asian Chinese literature, and they were written in the best language that you could get. But the thing is, I would give you an example how propaganda could change someone's mind. So my mother, her whole family were anti-communist in the Civil War in 1940s. So her two brothers and her father fought against communist army. So we were really bad seeds throughout history. And she was 6 when communism took over China, and she was in 1st grade. And then communism took over China. So all her life, she said, she could only remember one song before communism took over China. But she actually couldn't even remember that song. She remembered one sentence from that song. So when I was little, she always said, I just can't remember that song. I can sing the first line for you. So I have, in my memory, I had this one line song from my mother's memory. But we grew up, she liked to sing. She always sings propaganda songs. And in a way, I think propagandas can be touching. They can move you deeply, in a way. So one year, I was driving across Texas by myself. It was a long drive, and was a little sleepy. So what I did was I started to sing all the propaganda songs I grew up with from kindergarten until high school. And I really moved myself to tears when I was singing it, even though I knew the tears were not genuine. But I was aware, I think propaganda could touch someone, could move someone. And so I'm sensitive to that. And the other thing is, I do think once you lived in a life, like just take my mother as an example. She has lived all her life in this country where she actually does not like communism. She's very much, against the government in a way. But her whole vocabulary is communist vocabulary. Even in everyday little thing, her commentaries are just like newspaper commentaries. It's hard to hear when your mother speaks like newspaper all the time. So I feel that I am like very I think I'm sensitive to that kind of ugliness in language, and I really rebel against that. So maybe that explained why I use propaganda quite a few times. I mean, I think there are propaganda in English too, in all languages, yes. So I think, in a way, I think when I read English, I choose what to read. I'm not fed what I have to read. So I think that helps. Yeah.
So do you think when your parents pass on, you'll allow your literature to be translated into Chinese?
That's a good question. I don't know. I will tell you, I said this, I realized that after I said this in the press, a lot of people became unhappy. I said two things about not wanting to have my books translated. One is, I always say, I'm not ready. And then I say, China is not ready either. and I think one day if China can read me as they read, the Chinese readers can read me as they read, say, American writer, I think I would feel comfortable. But it's a fraught relationship when you write about your country in another language. There's always some sort of danger. And so maybe I am protective myself too, and I don't know. It's so far away.
Okay, I also wanted to ask, I apologize for just becoming aware of your work today through Radio Times.
Oh, okay.
But curious if you had lived any part of your life through the Cultural Revolution?
I was born late in Cultural Revolution, so personally I did not have a lot of experience, but my family, my grandfather who fought against communism, he especially experienced quite hardship. But I said my father was a nuclear physicist, so my grandfather lived with us, so he sort of protected. If you were a nuclear physicist in China, you were almost like a giant panda. I mean, they like you because you're a panda bear, so we were all protected by my father. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about growing up in China and living now in the United States, talking about memories, childhood memories, and so on and so forth. I grew up in another country, so there's always a tendency kind of to either romanticize a lot of memories or just completely disregard them if they were not very nice ones.
Right.
And so my question is, how do you reconcile those memories, or who you were or who you thought you were there, and who you think you are here? How do you reconcile it? Where is home?
Where's home?
Where's home?
Yeah. Yeah, let's start where's home. When I think the first few years when I was in America, when we went back to visit China, my husband and I are both Chinese, and we always said, let's go home. This summer, let's go home. And I was aware at some point the language started to change. It's not let's go home, it's let's go visit China. And when we started saying that, I realized home is America. And then we had children, and home is America. But you asked a good question. Well, how do you? I think I did write. I wrote in the book. I think there are so many ways to carry memories, as you said, to romanticize it, or to invalidate it and say those are bad things, or just to disengage yourself from memories. Any of those actions is not truthful. It's not truthful to the memory, but we cannot be completely truthful to memories. So I think for me, writing the book is to revisit memories and to see. I mean, one big theme in the book, it's about my relationship with my mother, who really is one of the most controlling mothers you could have met. But on the other hand, I just by writing about these things, and I realize actually, yes, I have these memories. They're really not great memories, but I understand her better after I sort out my memories. So yeah, I think memories are always subjective experience. It cannot be objective. And I that's why I'm interested in reading writers' journals, because they're in the moment. Unless they go back to revise their journals, most people don't, or letters, they are set in print or in ink. And I like to read those things and see, if people revise their memories. There is one writer who actually revised his memory. He was not a well-known writer. He was this young man in England. And when he was 17, he wanted to become a naturalist. But he couldn't become a naturalist. He was not educated enough. So he became a small-town newspaper reporter, because his father had a newspaper. So for about 11, 12 years, he kept a detailed diary of his life, just as a diarist. This was a turn of last century. And eventually, he got some sort of disease. He realized he was going to die soon, and this diary could give him immortality. So the idea just came to him. He was going to publish this diary. But when he wanted to publish a diary, he went back to revise. The reason people knew he revised was he would have descriptions of weather on certain days, and people would go back to the record, the weather record, and it didn't even happen on that day. There was no rain, it was sunny when it was stormy in his journal. So he became a fiction writer of his own. And when it came out, people would not believe for a while. People thought it was H.G. Wells who wrote the book as a fiction, as a novel. But it wasn't. It was a real collection of someone's diaries, except in that case, as you said, someone went back to revise the memory. Yeah.
I also would like to thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you.
I heard your interview today on NPR, and I had no plans to do anything but relax. However, you are a magnet. You drew me out of my house, and I'm not disappointed. And what I want to say to you is that I want to thank you for the courage that you showed by revealing to us the parts of you that are invisible.
Thank you so much. That's very touching. Thank you. And I hope you can relax tonight.
I think so. We are actually out of time, but thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you.